Hey guys, it's Nicole. I'm back with another video, and this one is about a book. And if you watch my channel, at least somewhat regularly, you know I like to post kind of like reviews. They're not really reviews, but they're like my thoughts on the books that I like to read. I've been reading a lot of books this year. I am currently up to 33 or 34. So it's been a long year of reading books. And don't get me wrong, I love reading books. And it's just crazy to look at this stack that I have just piled up in my room. It's insane. So I thought that some fun content was for some people, because if you're a bookworm like I am, would be to kind of talk about books together. I have been kind of reading different kinds of books lately. So they're not all in the same genre, although I think most of them have been in the fantasy genre, but not always. Sometimes it's just the fiction genre. But yes, so this is about a book. I picked up this book a couple months ago. I was at the bookstore with my friend, and I loved the title of the book and read the back and was instantly attracted to it. So I picked this up, and I am going a little bit in order of like my favorite books that I've read this year. So this is one of the books that I really loved, just as like a preview for what I think of it. Also, just in case anyone's worried about spoilers, I promise I will not give any spoilers until later in the video, and I will make it very clear that the part coming up is with spoilers. So I'll make it clear. I'll say, hey, thanks for watching. Now you can go. There's going to be spoilers now. So if you don't want spoilers, don't worry. You're not going to get any if you don't want any. So this is the book that we're going to be talking about today. It's called The Only Woman in the Room, and it's by Marie Benedict. And this was such a fun read. I obviously love the title. That's what I said. And for anyone who has experienced what it's like to be a woman in kind of really any culture, I'd have to say. I mean, I can't say for sure every single culture, but I'd say many cultures. There's something about being the only woman in the room. And I say that to mean that physically and also metaphorically. Because it's not just about feeling alone. It's also just feeling so not afraid is definitely one of the words I would use to describe it, but there's just something about being the only woman in the room that feels very stifling and almost, I'm trying to find the right word to describe what I'm talking about. Maybe I do mean alone, but not necessarily in the physical sense, in your head alone. And so that's why I love the title of the book, because anyone who has experienced being a woman, I feel, can identify with what that title alone means. And if you look at the cover of the book, yeah, you can see I got this from Barnes & Noble. You can see that the picture is of a woman, and she's in black and white. And there's a reason. And I think it's very clever to put her like this, because the book doesn't tell you who this is about. But it's actually, it's a fictional account of a real life person who did go through the events that happen in the book, but they are given a story so that it's cohesive and we can experience it. But maybe what was said in the book by the characters wasn't actually what happened, but the events surrounding it did happen. And that's going to make sense once I explain what I'm talking about. So this book surrounds the Hollywood actress from, I want to say, the 1940s, Hedy Lamarr. Now, for those of you who don't know who that is, she was she worked in America, but she was actually Austrian. But she was famous for doing all of those black and white movies back in the day. I'm blanking on the movies that she did, but think Casablanca. She wasn't in that one, but think that if you've ever heard of it. And those are the kinds of movies that she did. So she was one of the famous actresses of the silver screen, as they would call it. And I had heard of her before I read this book, but I didn't really know anything about her at all, not even from a fictional account surrounding real events. And I just thought she was just an actress. When I say just an actress, I mean like she acted and that's all she did. She didn't have another career or something else that she was doing in her life, but I couldn't have been further from the truth. So I'm going to read the back of the book, and that'll kind of give everyone an idea of what the book is about. So the back of the book starts with saying, "She possessed a stunning beauty that almost certainly saved her from the rising Nazi party and led to marriage with an Austrian arms dealer. She also possessed a stunning mind. Underestimated, she overheard the Third Reich's plans while at her husband's side, understanding more than anyone would guess. She devised a plan to flee in disguise from their castle, and the whirlwind escape landed her in Hollywood. She became Hedy Lamarr, screen star. But she kept a secret more shocking than her heritage or her marriage. She was a scientist, and she knew a few secrets about the enemy. She had an idea that might help the country fight the Nazis if anyone would listen to her. A powerful novel based on the incredible true story of the glamour icon and scientist whose groundbreaking invention revolutionized modern communication. The Only Woman in the Room is a masterpiece." So, that's what the book is about. And even just doing a little bit of digging, it's true. Hedy Lamarr was not only a beautiful film actress, she was this brilliant mind that understood the workings of technology back in the 1940s. And if you look it up, she and someone else, who I will talk about in a minute, is the inventor, the creator of the technology that led to today what we use for Wi-Fi. And everybody knows what Wi-Fi is. That's how big of an impact she had on our history, and I don't think anyone knows it. And that's why the title, The Only Woman in the Room, matters a lot, because there's just something about being a woman and having a mind and knowing that you have something to give and no one's going to listen to you because you're a woman. So I'm going to go ahead and, like I do, read the first page of the first chapter. And then I'll kind of talk a little bit about what's kind of a review of the book. And then we'll get into spoilers, and then I'll let everyone know when we're getting into spoilers, but no spoilers so far. To be honest, it's kind of easy to predict the end of this book because since it's based on historically accurate events. We all know what happened in the 1940s during World War II. So I can't really help what you know about that. So it's like spoilers, but not really. I like to give people how the beginning of the book goes so that you can kind of get a feel for how it sounds. So this is the first page of chapter 1, so of part 1, because it's, like I said, in 2 parts. So chapter 1, May 17th, 1933, Vienna, Austria. My lids fluttered open, but the floodlights blinded me for a moment. Placing a discreet, steadying hand on my co-star's arm, I willed a confident smile upon my lips while I waited for my vision to clear. The applause thundered, and I swayed in the cacophony of sound and light. The mask I'd firmly affixed to myself for the performance slipped away for a moment, and I was no longer 19th century Bavarian Empress Elizabeth, but simply young Hetty Keisler. I couldn't allow the theater-goers of the famed theater An der Wien That's a guess on how to say that. To see me falter in my portrayal of the city's beloved empress. Not even in the curtain call. She was the emblem of the once glorious Habsburg Austria, an empire that ruled for nearly 400 years, and the people clung to her image in these humiliating days after the Great War. Closing my eyes for a split second, I reached deep within myself, putting aside Hetty Keisler with all her small worries and comparatively petty aspirations. So that's the first page of the book. It's, as you can see, she was always an actress, even in Austria. And I really enjoyed this book. And not just in the sense, like, it was a fun ride, because it was, don't get me wrong, it was a fun ride. But it was like being transported in time. It was like I got to see what it was like for a young woman living in Austria right before World War II. And we all know what happened to Austria in World War II. And she escaped. That's not a spoiler. That's just, it even says it later in the book, later in the synopsis. And it's just a really great story, because even though what the characters might say in the book and those kinds of interactions, even though those might be fictional, the events were real. World War II happened, and there was a lot of people that did not make it out of those countries, where so many were, unfortunately, I hate to say the word, I don't know if I'm allowed to say it on YouTube, but where they, their lives were taken. And I know that's a bit dark, but the book itself is not. It's a really great story of persistence, I think is a really great word for it. She persists throughout the entire book, and that's because she, as the actual person, persisted throughout her entire life. And that's always a great story, you know, when someone doesn't give up. And that's what makes inspiring stories. So I don't think there's really anything in this book that I would say there's age restrictions needed. There are some scenes that start to go into more inappropriate scenes. So I definitely wouldn't recommend this to anyone under the age of 12 or 13. I think after that would probably be okay. And I think it's just, I think it's good for anyone to read. I don't think that it's just for women. I don't think a lot of that stuff is just for women. I think any story of persistence and perseverance is just a good story. That's just what makes it. So I highly recommend it to anyone who finds perseverance to be such a great story. And maybe someone who's interested and says, you know, I've heard the name Hedy Lamarr, but I've never known anything about her, so this book may be kind of cool. And it is. It really is. It's kind of eye-opening, because I think when we think of actors and actresses, even in the present, we think of them as just, you know, they just act. That's all they do. They're not anything else. But, I mean, the more we have such information all the time at our fingertips, the more we come to realize, hey, wait, there's a lot of actors that actually do other things besides acting, and they're very good at other things and very smart. And that, I think that our perception of actors especially back in the 40s was even worse, you know, that they were just expected to be pretty faces. They weren't expected to be anything else. They weren't supposed to have a mind. Their mind was only there to memorize the lines. And even then, did they have many of them? Who knows? And no, it turns out that, you know, if Hedy Lamarr, the actress known as Hedy Lamarr, had such a history, such a brain, obviously there's so many others that did too, that we just never knew about because we just assumed that they were just this one thing. And I think it's a great point that sometimes things are not as they seem, and there are people out there that will surprise you with their knowledge and intelligence. So that's why I loved this book. It was definitely a fun read, which is why I said I enjoyed it, but it was almost eye-opening and like a shift in perspective for me. So I definitely recommend, and I hope people go read it because I definitely love this book and I will be reading more. I love when they list like the other books that this author has written at the bottom, because now I'll probably be reading the others. And definitely go read it. I know that some people are not fans of physical books, but I will always be an old-fashioned girly at heart. I love the physical thing. So that's it for the review of it and a little bit of my thoughts. I'm going to go into some spoilers now. So if you don't want any spoilers, then thank you for watching. This is the end of the video for you. And I appreciate you coming on to watch my channel. So this is the end. So go ahead and leave the channel, leave the video. And now we're going to go into a little bit of spoilers from the book, kind of talking about what happens. And the other thing that may not be super age appropriate in this book is one of the main reasons she leaves her marriage to the arms dealer is because he's abusive, and not just emotionally abusive, but physically abusive, sexually abusive. He's, you know, he wooed her and charmed her at first because that's how it goes. And then he began treating her horribly once they were married, almost immediately. And she was very young. She was 18, 19, I think. I can't remember for sure. But he was 10 years older than her and had already been married before. And he pursued her. She, you know, in the book, and I'm assuming at least for the most part this is true to what actually happened, she was an actress in Austria on stage, and he saw her on stage and pursued her. And basically because of his connections to the political parties, because even in 1933 in Austria, people were aware of things happening. Hitler was in power by then, and things were happening, and they weren't sure what was gonna happen. And he was connected to all that. His name was Fritz. And they weren't sure what was going to happen, and her parents weren't sure, and so they ended up allowing her to continue seeing him. And then she found him interesting, so she married him. But then he started really horribly abusing and mistreating her. So yes, the main instigator that has her leave the marriage is the fact that he decided to start supporting Hitler in his agenda. Because at first he was resisting it, and he was mostly partnering up and agreeing with, I believe it was Italy's Mussolini, who at the time was not on Hitler's side, but then things changed. And that's when she realized she had to flee, because that was when Hitler was making his plans for the future of Germany very clear, and Fritz was on board with that. And the thing about Hedy Lamarr is she was born Jewish, and she was forced by her first husband to convert before they got married, but she was born Jewish, and so were her parents. And it didn't matter to anyone in Hitler's Germany. If you had any Jewish ancestry, there was a problem. And so that was the instigator that convinced her to flee, and not just flee from her husband, but to flee the country. And she was fortunate and made it out. And then she eventually got her mother out too, and her father had already passed. But that's where we come to later on in the book that I think is interesting, is that she escapes from Austria, right? And meaning she escapes everything that happened to anyone with any Jewish ancestry in Austria. And I like how in the book they go into this guilt that she feels, that she had this knowledge of what was about to come, and she did nothing but flee and save herself, and she didn't tell anyone. She did hint around at it to her mother, but her mother was already on bad terms with her, and she wasn't going to leave anyways. And so the guilt that she talks through in the book, in her head, because, our perspective is in her head, is probably the most intense guilt I think a person can feel. She learned information about an entire genocide that was about to happen. I don't know if I can say that word on YouTube either, but it's true. And she saved herself, and she didn't tell anyone else about it. I don't fault her, but that's the guilt that she's feeling, that she goes through in her mind. And I think it's such a heavy topic, and definitely interesting to watch a character play out. And I don't know if that's actually what led to her invention, or if, because I don't know what happened in real life versus what happened in just the book. But the truth is, she did work with a man, a composer actually, because she came up with an idea that was kind of based on how a piano works. After watching an acquaintance, because at first he was just an acquaintance, after watching him play on the piano, George and Theo, he was a composer, and the two of them created technology so that frequencies could hop from one thing to another, so that when, like, say, nukes or bombs were released, they couldn't be hacked by the enemy, because at the time they could be, because it was one frequency. But if they hopped frequencies like a piano does, and like our Wi-Fi does today, then you can't hack it. You can't get into it because it's jumping around too fast. And so they created that technology. So I don't know if her guilt was actually, in reality, what led to the invention, or if it just makes a good story. But it does make a good story for sure. And the technology they created is incredible. I mean, this is a piano player, a composer, and an actress, because that's what she was first. She was an actress who spent a lot of time around her husband, who was an arms dealer. So a composer and an actress created this technology that could have really saved a lot of lives and really turned the way the war went. But at the end of the book, and in real life, they did not use her technology in that war. They rejected it. They said something about it wasn't right. And then in the book, they have a character point out that it's because the idea came from a woman. The invention came from a woman. They don't trust it. It was the 1940s. And it's infuriating and accurate. And that's why it's very good book. So yeah, those are kind of my thoughts on how the book went itself. I like the storyline with her guilt. I think it was a very interesting one, and how her invention came to be, because in the real world, it is still used today in so many different things. And they actually did end up using it, I believe, in the Korean War, if I remember correctly. And it's still in use today. That's how much of an impact she and George Antheil had on the world. The whole world, because it's not just this country, it's the whole world. And yet, none of us know about it because people want to sweep that stuff under the rug. Especially if such an amazing invention came from a woman and a composer, and then the US Army didn't even take it and use it in that war, and it could have saved lives, it could have made the war shorter, it could have changed things, and they chose not to do it simply because it came from a woman. So I think it's a really great book and makes a really great point and talks about the events accurately, how they happened, but also has the storytelling fiction to move the plot along, you know, with what characters said, because who knows what the people themselves actually said. And that's why I find the book so good and why I enjoyed it so much. So if you liked what I heard about it, I think you should go read it. So that's all for this video. If you stuck around and watched all of it, I appreciate you and thank you so much for watching. I might be making more videos and posting them more frequently. I'm not positive yet, but just in case I do, I wanted to let you guys know. If you subscribe to my channel, you'll get notified as soon as I post something new. For sure, videos do get uploaded every Friday morning, so either way, you will get something every Friday. And if you like this video, like, comment, let me know if maybe you've read the book, maybe you liked it or anything. And if you want to follow me on social media, I have Instagram. I don't have anything else. My handle is nicolecalvetprescott. I'll write it in the description below because everyone always misspells my middle name. And yeah, thank you guys all so much for watching, and I will see you all next week.